once again back to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast where I'm your host, Jackson, and I go through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So, also, apart from Exploring Arda, I hope that you guys have enjoyed the first couple episodes of Traversing Through Terra, where it's pretty much just like my nature hikes of the nearby streams, and I go on the bike trails and I go into the woods and explore a little bit of that. So I hope you guys have enjoyed a little bit of that. I truly have so far, because it's just one of my fun hobbies that I like to have, especially in the spring and the summer. But I was like, I might as well start early and try to do some videos for you guys. So, and also I hope that you guys enjoyed the introduction to Grim Captivation, my paranormal podcast. Right now, at the time of the recording, I have the introduction and the first episode queued up right now. May or may not be uploaded by then, but I hope that you guys have enjoyed that as well. Both projects I've wanted to start for a while now, and now I think like this year I feel like it's very it's time, I guess, to kind of expand, to different projects. But obviously, Exploring Arda will always be my main project on this channel, and that kind of brings me to where we're at now, again, to the fall of Numenor. Yes. So we were left off. I think this is like part 5 by now, with Aldarion. Excuse me. Aldarion and Erendis pretty much end up together back in Numenor after Aldarion pretty much has like this really bad voyage, and he sees all these signs, and he's just like, okay, well, maybe after all these years of going back and forth, bickering between both his father, the king, and Erendis, who's basically, it will be his wife, because the next segment is called The Wedding of Aldarion and Erendis. So, it's kind of implied there. But, so that's kind of like where we're at in the story here. And I know that there's not like a whole lot of like action sequences and whatnot in all this time, but I know that eventually, pretty soon we get back into the enemies of the Second Age, which is basically like Sauron rising up to power and whatnot. But we get there eventually, because this segment is going to be all about the wedding of Aldarion and Erendis, which is like the whole segment, and it's going to take a while, so it's probably going to be a little longer of an episode. So I think with all the introductions out of the way and everything being said here, I think we can go into the story again. So let's do this. And also, my hair is not cooperating today, so we'll see about that too. Anyway, to the story here. Then, to the joy of Menuldur and Almarion, the wedding of the king's heir was proclaimed for the next spring. And so it came to pass. In the 870th year of the Second Age, Aldarion and Erendis were wedded in Armenelos, and in every house there was music, and all the streets men and women sang. And afterwards the king's heir and his bride rode at their leisure through all the isle, until at midsummer they came to Andunier, where the last feast was prepared by Valendil, its lord. And all the people of the Westlands were gathered there, for love of Erendis and pride that a queen of Numenor should come from among them. In the morning before the feast, Aldarion gazed out from the window of the bedchamber, which looked west over sea. "See, Erendis," he cried, "there is a ship speeding to haven, and it is no ship of Numenor, but one such as neither you nor I shall ever set foot upon, even if we would." Then Erendis looked forth, and she saw a tall white ship, with white birds turning in the sunlight all about it, and its sails glimmered with silver with the foam. At the stem it rowed towards the harbor. Thus the Eldar graced the wedding of Erendis, for love of the people of the Westlands, who were closest in their friendship. Their ship was laden with flowers for the adornment of the feast, so that all that sat there when evening was come were crowned with Eleanor, and sweet Lisuin, whose fragrance brings heart's ease. Minstrels they brought also, singers who remembered songs of elves and men in the days of Nargothrond and Gondolin long ago. And many of the Eldar, high and fair, were seated among men at the tables. But the people of Andunier, looking upon the blissful company, said that none were more fair than Erendis, and said that her eyes were as bright as were the eyes of Morwen Eledwen of old, or even those of Avalone. Many gifts the Eldar brought also. To Aldarion they gave a sapling tree whose bark was snow-white, and its stems straight, strong and pliant as if it were steel. But it was not yet in leaf. "I thank you," said Aldarion to the elves. "The wood of such a tree must be precious indeed." "Maybe, we know not," said they. "None has ever been hewn. It bears cool leaves in summer and flowers in winter. It is for this that we prize it." To Erendis they gave a pair of birds, grey, with gold beaks and feet. They sang sweetly to one another with many cadences never repeated through a long thrill of song, but if one were separated from the other, at once they flew together, and they would not sing apart. "How shall I keep them?" said Erendis. "Let them fly and be free," answered the Eldar, "for we have spoken to them and named you, and they will stay wherever you dwell. They mate for their life, and that is long. Maybe there will be many such birds to sing in the gardens of your children." That night Erendis awoke, and a sweet fragrance came through the lattice. But the night was light, for the full moon was westering. Then, leaving their bed, Erendis looked out and saw all the land sleeping in silver, but the two birds sat side by side upon her sill. When the feasting was ended, Aldarion and Erendis went for a while to her home, and the birds again perched upon the sill of her window. At length they bade Beregar and Nuneth farewell, and they rode back at last to Armenelos, for there by the king's wish his heir would dwell, and a house was prepared for them amidst a garden of trees. There the elven tree was planted, and the elven birds sang in its boughs. I'm going to do a little bit quick break here. So obviously this is the beginning of the wedding of Aldarion and Erendis, and yeah, from the distance, I don't know if you guys can hear it, my cat is crying his eyes out, but I'm going to leave him there. So yeah, basically everybody lines up for the wedding. Everybody's packed in. All the Eldar come in. Well, not all the Eldar, but the Eldar and friendship that they have with them are like, oh yeah, let's just go just because they're friends and whatnot. And they give Erendis a pair of birds that always sing and always is nearby. So it's a nice little gift there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I hope I don't do these interruptions too much. So back to the story. 2 years later, Erendis conceived, and in the spring of the year after, she bore to Aldarion a daughter. Even from birth, Even from birth, the child was fair, and grew ever in beauty. The woman most beautiful, as old tales tell, that ever was born in the line of Elros, save Zimrafel, the last. When her first naming was due, they called her Ancalame. Yeah, Ancalame, sure. In heart, Erendis was glad, for she thought, surely now Aldarion will desire a son to be his heir, and he will abide with me long yet. For in secret she still feared the sea and its power upon his heart, and though she strove to hide it, and would talk with him of his old ventures and of his hopes and designs, she watched jealously if he went into his house ship, or as much with the venturers. To Eambar, Aldarion once asked her to come, but seeing swiftly in her eyes that she was not full willing, he never pressed her again. Not without cause with Erendis' fear. When Aldarion had been 5 years ashore, he began to busy again with his mastership of forests, and was often many days away from his house. There was now indeed sufficient timber in Numenor, and that was chiefly owing to his prudence. Yet since the people were now more numerous, there was ever need of wood for building and for the making of many things beside. For in those ancient days, though many had great skill with stone and with such metals, since the Edain of old had learned much of the Noldar, the Numenorians loved things fashioned of wood, whether for daily use or for beauty of carving. At that time, Aldarion again gave most heed to the future, planning always when there was felling, and he had new woods to set to grow when there was room, a free land that was suited to trees of different kinds. It was then that he became most widely known as Aldarion, by which name he is remembered among those who held the scepter in Numenor. Yet to many beside Erendis it seemed that he had little love for trees in themselves, caring for them rather as timber than would serve his designs. Not far otherwise was it with the sea, for as Nuneth had said to Erendis long before, "Ships he may love, my daughter, for those are made by men's minds and hands, but I think that it is not the winds or the great waters that so burden his heart, nor yet the sight of strange lands, but some heat in his mind, for some dream that pursues him. And it may be that she struck near the truth, For Aldarion was a man long-sighted, and he looked forward to days when the people would need more room and greater wealth. And whether he himself knew this clearly or no, he dreamed of the glory of Numenor and the power of its kings, and he sought for footholds whence they could step to wider dominion. So it was that ere long he turned again from forestry to the building of ships, and a vision came to him of a mighty vessel like a castle with tall masts and great sails like clouds, bearing men and stores enough for a town. Then in the yards of Ravenna, the saws and hammers were busy, while among many lesser craft a great ribbed hull took shape, at which men wondered. Turafanto, the wooden whale, they called it, but that was not its name. Erendis learned of these things, though Aldarion had not spoken to her of them, and she was unquiet. Therefore one day she said to him, "What is all this busyness with the ships? Lord of the havens, have we not enough? How many fair trees have been cut short of their lives in this year?" She spoke lightly and smiled as she spoke. "A man must have work to do upon land," he answered, even though he have a fair wife. Trees spring and trees fall. I plant more than are felled. He spoke also in a light tone, but he did not look in her face. They did not speak again of these matters. But when Encalame, there you go, was close on 40 years old, Aldarion at last declared openly to Erendis his desire to sail again from Numenor. She sat silent, for he said nothing that she did not already know, and words were in vain. He tarried until the birthday of Encalame, and made much of her that day. She laughed and was merry, though others in that house were not so, and as she went to her bed she said to her father, "Where will you take me this summer, Titania, my father? I should like to see the white house and the sheep land that Mamil, mother, tells of." Aldarion did not answer, and the next day he left the house, and was gone for some days. When all was ready he returned and bade Erendis farewell. Then against her will, tears were in her eyes. They grieved him, and yet irked him, for his mind was resolved, and he hardened his heart. "Come, Erendis," he said, 8 years I have stayed. You cannot bind forever in soft bonds the son of the king, and the blood of Tuor and Erendil, and I am not going to my death. I shall soon return." "Soon?" she said, "but the years are unrelenting, and you will not bring them back with you, and mine are briefer than yours. My youth runs away, and where are my children, and where is your heir? Too long and often of late is my bed cold." "Often of late I have thought that you preferred it so," said Aldarion, "but let us not be wroth, even if we are not of like mind. Look in your mirror, Erendis. You are beautiful, and no shadow of age is there yet. You have time to spare to my deep need. 2 years. 2 years is all that I ask." But Erendis answered, "Say rather, 2 years I will take, whether you will or no. Take 2 years then, but no more. A king's son of the blood of Erendil should also be a man of his word." Next morning Aldarion hastened away. He lifted up Encalame and kissed her, but though she clung to him, he set her down quickly and rode off. Soon after the great ship set sail from Ravenna. Hirelande he named it, Haven Finder, but it went from Numenor without the blessing of Tar Menuldur, and Erendis was not at the harbor to see the green bow of return, nor did she send. Aldarion's face was dark and troubled as he stood at the prow of Hirelande, where the wife of his captain had set a great branch of Oyalari, but he did not look back until the Meneltarmo was far off into the twilight. Alright, do a little bit of a break here. So obviously Aldarion is back at it again. He's just like, "No, listen, like I've been here for 8 years, I had a kid with you, and all that stuff, and now I need to go back into the sea again." It's like, at this point Aldarion's very stubborn, I feel like. Where, yeah, okay, I get that he enjoys the sea. He's a sea-loving man, I guess, or whatever. He loves his travels, but once he starts a family, I kind of figured that he would, actually stay where he was and actually raise his family. But he's like, nope. The sea calls to me again, and so here he goes off for 2 years, and who knows if he's going to return, because the blessings of the bow of return were not sent, nor were they put on the ship. So that's pretty much just like bad omens in a way, I suppose. Well, we're not really a bad omen. It's just helpful protection, I suppose. So, but yeah. So back into the story once again. All that day, Erendis sat in her chamber alone, grieving, but deeper in her heart she felt a new pain of cold anger, and her love of Aldarion was wounded to the quick. She hated the sea, and now even trees that once she had loved, she desired to look upon no more, for they recalled to her the masts of great ships. Therefore, ere long she left Armenelos, and went to Emeria, in the midst of the isle, wherever, far and near, the bleating of sheep was borne upon the wind. Sweeter it is to my ears than the mewing of gulls, she said, as she stood at the doors of her white house, the gift of the king, and that was upon a downside facing west, with great lawns all about that burst without wall or hedge into the pastures. Thither she took Calame, and they were all the company that either had. For Erendis would have only servants in her household, and they were all women, and she sought ever to mold her daughter to her own mind, and to feed her upon her own bitterness against men. And Calame seldom indeed saw any man, for Erendis kept no state, and her few farm servants and shepherds had a homestead at a distance. Other men did not come there, save rarely some messenger from the king, and he would ride away soon, for to men there seemed a chill in the house that put them to flight, and while there they felt constrained to speak half in whisper. One morning, soon after Erendis came to Emeria, she awoke to the song of birds, and there on the sill of her window were the elven birds that long had dwelt in the garden in Armenelos, but which she had left behind forgotten. "Sweet fools, fly away," she said. "This is no place for such joy as yours." Then their song ceased, and they flew up over the trees. Thrice they wheeled above the roofs, and then they went away westward. That evening they settled upon the sill of the chamber in the house of her father, where she had lain with Aldarion on their way from the feast in Andunie, and there Nuneth and Beregar found them in the morning of the next day. But when Nuneth held out hands to them, they flew steeply up and fled away, and she watched them until they were specks in the sunlight, speeding to the sea, back to the land whence they came. "He has gone again, then, and left her," said Nuneth. "Then why has she not sent news?" said Beregar, "or why has she not come home?" "She has sent news enough," said Nuneth, "but she has dismissed the elven birds, and that was ill done. It bodes no good. Why, my daughter? Surely you knew what you must face. But let her alone, Beregar, wherever she may be. This is her home no longer, and she will not be healed here. He will come back, and then may the Valar send her wisdom, or guile at the least." And then I'll do a quick break, just very quick. So obviously Erendis is very, heartbroken at Aldarion's decisions, which I think for me only makes sense. So of course she sends away the birds that I feel like kind of just meant, I feel like it kind of stood as like a symbol of, like the two birds always together, doing everything together, and they follow both Aldarion and Erendis wherever they are, which, it's like equal pairs, they do everything together, and then now that they're separated and they're apart, why bother having the birds when it just reminds her of their weddings and their marriage and all that stuff, and he's just gone. So very, very heartbroken and pretty much depressed. So but back to the story here. When the second year after Aldarion's sailing came in, by the king's wish, Erendis ordered the house in Armenelos to be arrayed and made ready, but she herself made no preparation for return. To the king she sent answers, saying, "I will come if you command me, Atar Aranya, Father King. But have I a duty now to hasten? Will it not be time enough when his sail is seen in the east?" And to herself she said, "Will the king have me wait upon the quays like a sailor's lass? Would that I were, but I am so no longer. I have played that part to the full." But that year passed, and no sail was seen, and the next year came and waned into autumn. Then Erendis grew hard and silent. She ordered that the house in Armenelos be shut, and she went never more than a few hours' journey from her house in Emeria. Such love as she had was all given to her daughter, and she clung to her, and would not have Calame leave her side, not even to visit Nuneth and her kin in the Westlands. All in Calame's teaching was from her mother, and she learned well to write and to read, and to speak the elven tongue with Erendis, after the manner in which high men of Numenor used it. For in the Westlands it was a daily speech in such houses as Beregar's, and Erendis seldom used the Numenorian tongue, which Aldarion loved the better. Much in Calame also learned of Numenor in the ancient days in such books and scrolls as were in the house which she could understand, and lore of other kinds, of the people in the land, she heard at times from the women of the household, though of this Erendis knew nothing. But the women were chary of their speech to the child, fearing their mistress, and there was little enough of laughter for an Calame in the White House in Emerie. It was hushed and without music, as if one had died there not long since. For in Numenor in those days it was the part of men to play upon instruments, and the music that Calame heard in childhood was the singing of women at work, out of doors, and away from the hearing of the White Lady of Emerie. But now Calame was 7 years old, and as often as she could get leave, she would go out of the house and on the wide downs, where she could run free, and at times she would go with the shepherdess, tending the sheep and eating under the sky. One day in the summer of that year, a young boy, but older than herself, came to the house on an errand from one of the distant farms, and Calame came upon him munching bread and drinking milk in the farm courtyard at the rear of the house. He looked at her, there you go, without deference, and went on drinking. Then he sat down his mug. "Stare if you must, great eyes," he said. "You're a pretty girl, but too thin. Will you eat?" He took a loaf out of his bag. "Be off, Ebal," cried an old woman coming from the dairy door, "and use your long legs, or you'll forget the message I gave you for your mother before you get home." "No need for a watchdog where you are, Mother Zemin," cried the boy, and with a bark and a shout, he leapt over the gate and went off at a run down the hill. Zemin was an old countrywoman, free-tongued and not easily daunted, even by the White Lady. "What noisy thing was that?" said Calame. "A boy," said Zemin, "if you know what that is." "But how should you? They're breakers and eaters, mostly. That one is ever eating, but not to no purpose. Fine lad his father will find when he comes back, but if that is not soon, he'll scarce know him. I might say that of others." "Has the boy then a father too?" asked Calame. "To be sure," said Zemin. "Ulbar, one of the shepherds of the great lord away south. The sheep lord we call him, a kinsman of the king." "Then why is the boy's father not at home?" "Why, Herenke, little lady," said Zemin, "because he heard of those venturers, and took up with them, and went away with your father, the Lord Aldarion, but the Valar know whither, or why." That evening Calame said suddenly to her mother, "Is my father also called the Lord Aldarion?" "He was," said Erendis, "but why do you ask?" Her voice was quiet and cool, but she wondered and was troubled, for no word concerning Aldarion had passed between them before. And Calame did not answer the question. "When will he come back?" she said. "Do not ask me," said Erendis. "I do not know. Never, perhaps. But do not doubt yourself, for you have a mother, and she will not run away while you love her." And Calame did not speak of her father again. The days passed, bringing in another year, and then another. In that spring Calame was 9 years old. Lambs were born and grew, shearing came and passed. A hot summer burned the grass. Autumn turned to rain. Then out of the east upon a cloudy wind, Hirolande came back over the grey seas, bearing Aldarion to Romena, and word was sent to Emerie, but Erendis did not speak of it. There were none to greet Aldarion upon the quays. He rode through the rain to Armenelos, and he found his house shut. He was dismayed, but he would ask news of no man. First he would seek the king, for he thought he had much to say to him. He found his welcome no warmer than he looked for, and Menuldur spoke to him as king to a captain, whose conduct was in question. "You have been long away," he said coldly. "It is more than 3 years now since the date that you set for your return." "Alas," said Aldarion, even I have become weary of the sea, and for long my heart has yearned westward. But I have been detained against my heart. There is much to do, and all things go backward in my absence." "I do not doubt it," said Menuldur. "You will find it true here also in your right land, I fear." "That I hope to redress," said Aldarion. "But the world is changing again. Outside, nigh on 1,000 years have passed since the Lord of the West sent their power against Angband, and those days are forgotten, or wrapped in dim legend among the men of Middle-earth. They are troubled again, and fear haunts them. I desire greatly to consult with you, to give account of my deeds, and my thought concerning what should be done." "You shall do so," said Menuldur. "And indeed, I expect no less, but there are other matters which I judge more urgent. Let a king first rule well his own house ere he corrects others, it is said. It is true of all men. I will now give you counsel, son of Menuldur. You have also a life of your own. Half of yourself you have ever neglected. To you I say now, go home." Aldarion stood suddenly still, and his face was stern. "If you know, tell me," he said. "Where is my home?" "Where your wife is," said Menuldur. "You have broken your word to her whether by necessity or no. She dwells now in Emeria, in her own house, far from the sea. Thither you must go at once. Had any word been left for me whither to go, I would have gone directly from the haven, said Aldarion. But at least I need not now ask tidings from strangers. He turned then to go, but paused, saying, Captain Aldarion has forgotten somewhat that belongs to his other half, which in his waywardness he also thinks urgent. He has a letter that he was charged to deliver to the king of Armenelos. Presenting it to Menuldur, he bowed and left the chamber, and within an hour he took horse and rode away, though night was falling. With him he had but 2 companions, men from his ship, Hendirch of the Westlands, and Olbar, who came from Emeria. Riding hard, they came to Emeria at nightfall of the next day, and men and horses were weary. Cold and white looked the house on the hill in the last gleam of sunset under cloud. He blew a horn call as soon as he saw it from afar. As he leapt from his house in the forecourt, he saw Erendis. Clad in white, she stood upon the steps that went up to the pillars before the door. She held herself high, but as he drew near, he saw that she was pale and her eyes overbright. You come late, my lord, she said. I had long ceased to expect you. I fear that there is no such welcome prepared for you as I had made when you were due. Mariners are not hard to please, he said. That is well, she said. She turned back into the house and left him. Then 2 women came forward, and an old crone who went down the steps. As Aldarion went in, she said to the men in a loud voice, so that he could hear her, There is no lodging for you here. Go down to the homestead at the hill's foot. No, Zamin, said Olbar, I'll not stay. I am for home, by the Lord Aldarion's leave. Is all well there? Well enough, she said. Your son has eaten himself out of your memory. But go and find your own answers. You'll be warmer there than your captain. Alright, a little bit of a break here, and I gotta kind of stretch my back out, because, man, it's gonna be a long read. So finally, Aldarion returns. Hooray! But in this whole time, Erendis is pretty much teaching their daughter, and I can never properly pronounce it. I think it's Encalame. I'm just gonna say Encalame. That basically, like, Aldarion almost is becoming like more of a myth, or he's like not even there half the time. And even like Menuldur is just like, yeah, you have neglected literally half of your life, so maybe you should actually go back and try to fix it. But even then, Erendis is cold. She's just very cold-hearted now, because he's broken so many promises. So, and he's always at sea. So it's not looking good for Aldarion, that's for sure. And with Erendis, she's just like, he doesn't trust a lot of people anymore. So very secluded, I feel like. It is a little bit sad, though, just to kind of see that Aldarion is just, he is neglectful of pretty much his whole family. So yeah, it definitely sucks. So back to the story again. Erendis did not come to the table at his late evening meal, and Aldarion was served by women in a room apart. But before he was done, she entered and said before the women, You will be weary, my lord, after such haste. A guest room is made ready for you when you will. My women will wait on you. Wah. If you are cold, call for fire. Aldarion made no answer. He went early to the bedchamber, and being now weary, he cast himself on the bed, and forgot soon the shadows of Middle-earth, and of Numenor in heavy sleep. But at a cockcrow he awoke to a great disquiet and anger. He rose at once, and thought to go without noise from the house. He would find his man Hendirch, interesting name, and the horses, and ride to his kinsman Haladan, the sheep lord of Hyarostorni. Yep, there you go. I know that's like one of the regions of Numenor. That's a really hard word to pronounce. Hyarostorni. Something like that. Later he would summon Erendis to bring his daughter to Armenelos, and not have dealings with her upon her own ground. But as he went towards the door, Erendis came forward. She had not lain in bed that night, and she stood before him on the threshold. You leave more promptly than you came, my lord, she said. I hope that, being a mariner, you have not found this house of women irksome already, to go thus before your business is done. Indeed, what business brought you hither? May I learn it before you leave? I was told in Armenelos that my wife was here, and had removed my daughter hither, he answered. As to my wife, I am mistaken, it seems. But have I not a daughter? You had one some years ago, she said, but my daughter has not yet risen. Then let her rise while I go for my horse, said Aldarion. Erendis would have withheld Encalame from meeting him at that time, but she feared to go so far as to lose the king's favor, and the council had long shown their displeasure at the upbringing of the child in the country. Therefore, when Aldarion rode back, when Hendrich was beside him, Encalame stood beside her mother on the threshold. She stood erect and stiff as her mother, and made no courtesy as he dismounted and came up the steps toward her. Who are you? She said. Why do you bid me to rise so early, before the house is stirring? Aldarion looked at her keenly, and though his face was stern, he smiled within, for he saw there a child of his own, rather than of Erendis, for all her schooling. You knew me once, Lady Encalame, she said, but no matter. Today I am but a messenger from Armenelos, to remind you that you are the daughter of the king's heir, and, so far as I can now see, you shall be his heir in your turn. You will not always dwell here, but go back to your bed now, my lady, until your maidservant wakes you, if you will. I am in haste to see the king. Farewell. He kissed the hand of Encalame, and went down the steps. Then he mounted and rode away with a wave of his hand. Erendis alone at a window watched him riding down the hill, and she remarked that he rode towards Hierostorni, and not towards Armenelos. Then she wept from grief, but still more from anger. She had looked for some penitence, that she might extend after rebuke pardon if prayed for, but he had dealt with her as if she were the offender, and ignored her before her daughter. Too late she remembered the words of Nuneth long before, and she saw Aldarion now as something large and not to be tamed, driven by a fierce will, more perilous when chill. She rose and turned from the window, thinking of her wrongs. Perilous, she said. I am steel hard to break, so he would find even were he the king of Numenor. Aldarion rode on to Hierostorni, the house of Halatan, his cousin, for he had a mind to rest there for a while and take thought. When he came near, he heard the sound of music, and he found the shepherds making merry for the homecoming of Olbar, with many marvelous tales and many gifts. And the wife of Olbar, garlanded, was dancing with him to the playing of pipes. At first none observed him, and he sat on his horse watching with a smile. But then suddenly Olbar cried out, "The great captain!" and Ebal his son ran forward to Aldarion's stirrup. "Lord Captain," he said eagerly. "What is it?" "I am in haste," said Aldarion, for now his mood was changed, and he felt wrathful and bitter. "I would but ask," said the boy, "how old must a man be before he may go over sea in a ship like my father?" "As old as the hills, and with no other hope in life," said Aldarion, or whenever he has a mind. "But your mother, Olbar's son, will she not greet me?" When Olbar's wife came forward, Aldarion took her hand. "Will you receive this of me?" he said. "It is but little return for 6 years of good man's aid that you gave me." Then from a wallet under his tunic he took a jewel red like fire, upon a band of gold, and he pressed it into her hand. "From the king of elves it came," he said, but he will think it well bestowed when I tell him." Then Aldarion bade farewell to the people there, and rode away, having no mind now to stay in that house. When Halatan heard of the strange coming and going, he marveled, until more news ran through the countryside. Aldarion rode only a short way from Hierostorni, and then he stayed his horse, and spoke to Hendrich, his companion. "Whatever welcome awaits you, friend, out of west, I will not keep you from it. Ride now home with my thanks. I have a mind to go alone." "It is not fitting, Lord Captain," said Hendrich. "It is not," said Aldarion, "but that is the way of it. Farewell." Then he rode on alone to Armenelos, and never again set foot in Emeria. When Aldarion left the chamber, Menuldur looked at the letter that his son had given him, wondering, for he saw that it came from King Gilgalad in Lindon. It was sealed and bore his device of white stars upon a blue rondure. Upon the outer fold was written, "Given at Mithlond to the hand of the Lord Aldarion, king's heir of Numenor, to be delivered to the High King at Armenelos in person." And then before I actually go into what the letter says, do a little quick break, kind of stretch out my back here because it's getting a little sore. So, yeah, Aldarion tries to pretty much go to the house and act like he's like nothing's happened. Like he's just like, hey, I'm here now. Yeah, I might be late, and there are some things going on in Middle Earth and whatnot, but now I'm here. But at this time, Erendis is just so strict and not happy. I mean, it only makes sense because, I mean, he's just coming barging in, like, acting like he's just like, hey, where's my kid? Where's my daughter? And my wife, like, I thought like, you would be her still. And it's like, no, dude, of course not. After so long and that broken promise. Which is sad. I laugh about it, but it's just like it's a sad truth that he finally realizes that being away for so long that it affects people that way. So and now we're here and where Menuldur is reading what Gil-galad wrote to him. So then Menuldur broke the seal and read, Erenion Gil-galad, son of Fingon to Tar Menuldur of the line of Erendil, greeting. The Valor keep you, and may no shadow fall upon the Isle of Kings. Long I have owed you thanks, for you have so many times sent to me your son Enordil Aldarion, the greatest elf friend that is now among men, as I deem. At this time I ask your pardon, if I have detained him overlong in my service, for I had great need of the knowledge of men and their tongues which he alone possesses. He has dared many perils to bring me counsel. Of my need he will speak to you, yet he does not guess how great it is, being young and full of hope. Therefore I write this for the eyes of the King of Numenor only. A new shadow arises in the east. It is no tyranny of evil men, as your son believes, but a servant of Morgoth is stirring, and evil things awake again. Each year it gains in strength, for most men are ripe in its purpose. Not far off is the day, I judge, when it will become too great for the Eldar unaided to withstand. Therefore, whenever I behold a tall ship of the kings of men, my heart is eased, and now I make bold to seek your help. If you have any strength of men to spare, lend it to me, I beg. Your son will report to you, if you will, all our reasons. But in fine it is his counsel, and that is ever wise, that when assault comes, as it surely will, we should seek to hold the Westlands, where still the Eldar dwell, and men of your race, whose hearts are not yet darkened. At the least we must defend Eriador, about the long rivers west of the mountains that we named Hithagler, our chief defense. But in that mountain wall there is a great gap southward in the land of Kalinardan, and by that way inroad from the east must come. Already enmity creeps along the coast towards it. It could be defended and assault hindered, did we hold some seat of power upon the near shore. So the Lord Aldarion long has seen. At Vinulande by the mouth of Gwathlo, he has long labored to establish such a haven, secure against sea and land, but his mighty works have been in vain. He has great knowledge in such matters, for he has learned much from Círdan, and he understands better than any needs of your great ships. But he has never had any men enough, whereas Círdan has no rights or masons to spare. The king will know his own needs, but if he will listen with favor to the Lord Aldarion and support him as he may, then hope will be greater to the world. The memories of the first age are dim, and all things in Middle-earth grow colder. Let not the ancient friendship of Eldar and Dunedain wane also. Behold, the darkness that is to come is filled with hatred for us, but it hates you no less. The great sea will not be too wide for its wings, if it is suffered to become to full growth. Manwe keep you under the one, and send fair wind to your sails. Menuldur let the parchment fall into his lap. Great clouds borne upon a wind out of the east brought darkness early, and the tall candles at his side seemed to dwindle in the gloom that filled his chamber. May Eru call me before such a time comes, he cried aloud. Then to himself he said, Alas, that his pride and my coolness have kept our minds apart so long. But sooner now than I had resolved it will be the course of wisdom to resign the scepter to him, for these things are beyond my reach. When the Valar gave to us the land of gift, okay, they did not make us their vice-regents. We were given the kingdom of Numenor, not of the world. They are the lords. Here we were to put away hatred and war, for war was ended and Morgoth thrust forth from Arda. So I deemed, and so I was taught. So was taught. Yet if the world grows again dark, the lords must know, and they have sent me no signs, unless this be the sign. What then? Our fathers were rewarded for the aid they gave in the defeat of the great shadow. Shall their sons stand aloof if evil finds a new head? I am in too great doubt to rule, to prepare or to let be, to prepare for war which is yet only guessed, train craftsmen and tillers in the midst of peace for blood spilling and battle, put iron in the hands of greedy captains who will love only conquest, and count the slain as their glory. Will they say to Eru, at least your enemies were amongst them? Or to fold hands while friends die unjustly? Let men live in blind peace until the ravisher is at the gate? What then will they do? Match naked hands against iron and die in vain, or flee, leaving the cries of women behind them? Will they say to Eru, at least I spilled no blood? When either way may lead to evil, of what worth is choice? Let the Valar rule under Eru. I will resign the scepter to Aldarion, yet that also is a choice, for I know well which road he will take, unless Erendis. Then Menuldur's thought turned in disquiet to Erendis in Emeria. But there is a little hope there, if it should be called hope. He will not bend in such grave matters. I know her choice, even were she to listen long enough to understand, for her heart has no wings beyond Numenor, and she has no guess of the cost. If her choice should lead to death in her own time, she would die bravely. But what will she do with life and other wills? Live out of themselves, even as I must wait to discover. Alright, quick break here, and I don't know if I can shut this any further, but there is a blinding light now on this side, so I'm going to actually switch it a little bit here so that you guys aren't totally blinded. It doesn't matter anyway. Alright, so so the king's message from Gil-galad to Menuldur is basically like, hey, Morgoth's servant is still out there, and it's becoming a problem, basically, by now. And so he's just like, yeah, Aldarion was sent here a lot of the times, and he helped us defend against such evil, and now he's asking for the full strength of Numenor, and Menuldur is like, well, he's like, he understands, but he's just like, he doesn't want any part of it, so he's just being stubborn. He's like, maybe I should just crown Aldarion king and let him take care of it, because apparently he knows everything about it since he's been over there, and that's why he was pretty much late for his his return. So strife with Sauron is continuing, basically. So off we go once more. Whoop, hold on. I almost lost my space. Well, lost my... okay, I cannot read. Anyway, back to the story here. Aldarion came back to Ravenna on the 4th day after Hirulande had returned to Haven. He was way-stained and weary, and he went at once to Eambar, upon which now he intended to dwell. By that time, as he found to his embitterment, many tongues were already wagging in the city. On the next day he gathered men in Ravenna and brought them to Armenelos. There he bade some fell all the trees save one in his garden, and take them to the shipyards. Others he commanded to raze his house to the ground. The white elven tree alone he spared, and when the woodcutters were gone, he looked at it, standing amid the desolation, and he saw for the first time that it was in itself beautiful. In its slow elven growth it was yet but 12 feet high, straight, slender, youthful, now budded with its winter flowers upon upheld branches pointed to the sky. It recalled to him his daughter, and he said, I will call you also Encalame. May you and she stand so in long life, unbent by wind or will, and unclipped. On the 3rd day after his return from Emeria, Aldarion sought the king. Tar Menuldur sat still in his chair and waited. Looking at his son, he was afraid, for Aldarion was changed. His face was become gray, cold, and hostile, as the sea when the sun is suddenly veiled in dull cloud. Standing before his father, he spoke suddenly with tone of contempt rather than of wrath. What part you have played in this you yourself know best, he said. But a king should consider how much a man will endure, though he be a subject, even his son. If you would shackle me to this island, then you choose your chain ill. I have now neither wife nor love of this land left. I will go from this misenchanted isle of daydreams, where women in their insolence would have men cringe. I will use my days to some purpose elsewhere, where I am not scorned, more welcome and honor. Another heir you may find more fit for a house servant. Of my inheritance I demand only this: the ship Hirolande and as many men as it will hold. My daughter I would take also, were she colder, but I will command her to my mother. Unless you dote upon sheep, you will not hinder this, and you will not suffer the child to be stunted, reared among mute women in cold insolence and contempt of her kin. She is of the line of Elros, and no other descendant will you have through your son. I have done. I will go now about business more profitable. Thus far Menuldur had sat in patience, with downcast eyes, and made no sign. But now he sighed and looked up. Aldarion, my son, he said sadly, the king would say that you also show cold insolence and contempt of your kin, and yourself condemn others unheard. But your father, who loves you and grieves for you, will remit that. The fault is not mine, only that I have not ere now understood your purposes. But as for what you have suffered, of which alas too many now speak, I am guiltless. Erendis I have loved, and since our hearts lean the same way, I have thought that she had much to endure that was hard. Your purposes are now become clear to me, though if you are in mood to hear aught but praise, I would say that at first your own pleasure also led you, and it may be things would have been otherwise if you have spoken more openly long ago. The king may have some grievance in this, cried Aldarion, now more hotly, but not the one you speak of. To her at least I spoke long and often, to cold ears uncomprehending. As well might a truant boy talk of tree climbing to a nurse anxious only about the tearing of clothes in the due time of meals. I love her, or I should care less. The past I will keep in my heart. The future is dead. She does not love me, or aught else. She loves herself with Numenor as a setting, and myself as a tame hound, to drowse by the hearth until she has a mind to walk in her own fields. But since hounds now seem too gross, she will have Encalamate to pipe in a cage. But enough of this. Have I the king's leave to depart, or has he some command? The king, answered Menuldur, has thought much about these matters, and in what seemed the long days since you were in Armenelos. He has read the letter of Gilgalad, which is earnest and grave in tone. Alas, to his prayer and your wishes the king of Numenor must say nay. He cannot do otherwise, according to his understanding of the perils of either course, to prepare for war, or not to prepare. Aldarion shrugged his shoulders, and took a step as if to go. But Menuldur held up his hand, commanding attention, and continued, Nevertheless, the king, though he has now ruled the land of Numenor for 142 years, has no certainty that his understanding of the matter is sufficient for a just decision in matters of such high import and peril. He paused, and taking up a parchment written in his own hand, he read from it in a clear voice. Therefore, first for the honor of his well-beloved son, and second for the better direction of the realm and courses which his son more clearly understands, the king has resolved that he will go forthwith, resign the scepter to his son, who shall now become Tar Aldarion the king. This, said Menuldur, when it is proclaimed, will make known to all my thought concerning this present pass. I will praise you, it will raise you above scorn, and it will set free your powers, so that other losses may seem more easy to endure. The letter of Gilgalad, when you are king, you shall answer as seems fit to the holder of the scepter. Aldarion stood still for a moment in amaze. He had braced himself to face the king's anger, which willfully he had endeavored to kindle. Now he stood confounded. Then, as one swept from his feet by a sudden wind from a quarter unexpected, he fell to his knees before his father. But after a moment he raised his bowed head and laughed. So he always did, and when he heard of any deed of great generosity, for it gladdened his heart. Father, ask the king to forget my insolence to him, for he is great king, and his humility sets him far above my pride. I am conquered, I submit myself wholly. That such a king should resign the scepter while in vigor and wisdom is not to be thought. Yet so it is resolved, said Menuldur. The council shall be summoned forthwith. Okay, I think I'm going to do one more break before this long episode is pretty much done. So, yeah, so now Aldarion is pretty much going to be crowned king, given the scepter, and he will become the king of Numenor. But Aldarion's pretty much just like, hey, let me go. Wife doesn't love me. The daughter is clinging to, his wife, and so he pretty much asks Meneldur, he's just like, let me just go and never come back. I think that's kind of like what the whole vibe is with him. And instead, Meneldur was like, actually, no, you can't go, but here's the thing, it's because I'm giving you the scepter and you're going to become the king of Numenor. So, crazy how that all happens. And Aldarion's just like, oh, sure, I suppose so. And so, I guess that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, back to the story so I can finish it. When the council came together after 7 days had passed, Tar Meneldur acquainted them with his resolve, and laid the scroll before them. Then all were amazed, not yet knowing what were the courses of which the king spoke, and all demurred, begging him to delay his decision, save only Halatin of Hierostorni, for he had long held his kinsman Aldarion in esteem, though his own life and likings were far otherwise, and he judged the king's deed to be noble, and timed with shrewdness, if it must be. But to those others he urged this or that against his resolve. Meneldur answered, Not without thought did I come to this resolution, and in my thought I have considered all the reasons that you wisely argue. Now and not later is the time most fit for my will to be published, for reasons which, though none here has uttered, all must guess. Forthwith, then, let this decree be proclaimed, but if you will, it shall not take effect until the time of the Erukirme in the spring. Till then, I will hold the scepter. When news came to Emeria of the proclamation of the decree, Erendis was dismayed, for she read therein a rebuke by the king and those in whose favor she had trusted. In this she saw truly, but that anything else of greater import lay behind she did not conceive. Soon afterwards there came a message from Tar Meneldur, a command indeed, though graciously worded. She was bidden to come to Armenelos and to bring with her the lady and Calame, there to abide at least until the Erukirme and the proclamation of the new king. He is swift to strike, she thought, so I should have foreseen. He will strip me of all, but myself he shall not command, though it be the mouth of his father. Therefore she returned answer to Tar Meneldur, King and father, my daughter and Calame must come indeed, if you command it. I beg that you will consider her years, and see to it that she is lodged in quiet. For myself, I pray you to excuse me. I learn that my house in Armenelos has been destroyed, and I would not at this time willingly be a guest, least of all upon a house ship upon mariners. Here then permit me to remain in my solitude, unless it be the king's will also to take back his house. This letter Tar Meneldur read with concern, but it missed his mark in his heart. He showed it to Aldarion, to whom it seemed chiefly aimed. Then Aldarion read the letter, and the king, regarding the face of his son, said, Doubtless you are grieved, but for what else did you hope? Not for this, at least, said Aldarion. It is far below my hope of her. She has dwindled, and if I have wrought this, then black is my shame. But do the large shrink in adversity? This was not the way, not even in hate or revenge. She would have demanded that a great house be prepared for her, called for a queen's escort, and come back to Armenelos with her beauty adorned, royally, with the star on her brow. Then well nigh all the isle of Numenor she might have bewitched to her part, and made me seem madman and truer. The valor be my witness, I would rather have it so. Rather a beautiful queen to thwart me and flout me, than freedom to rule while the lady Elisterne falls down dim with her own twilight. Then with a bitter laugh he gave back the letter to the king. Well, so it is, he said. But if one has a distaste to dwell on a ship among mariners, another may be excused dislike of a sheep farm among serving women. But I will not have my daughter so schooled. At least she shall choose my knowledge. He rose and begged leave to go. All right, so that is actually the end of the whole section was called The Wedding of Aldarion and Erendis, but it definitely does not end in that sort of way that you would think that it might have been a little, happier, but definitely not so. But yeah, so he pretty much in the next section, I should say, Aldarion does end up becoming king, but I guess to kind of pretty much summarize the last thing is that Erendis is still very much, I guess, kind of hateful toward Aldarion just because of everything that he neglects. like it was said earlier, and he's turning out to be not the best guy. Despite the help that Gil-galad is like, hey, this guy's actually really important. Every time that he comes over, he helps both the elves and the men out. Obviously, Sauron is still stirring in Middle-earth, which is kind of like the whole point of the letter to Menuldur, and now the elves, the Eldar, are asking for as much help as possible. But Menuldur's like, nope, you're king now, Aldarion. So, but yeah, and then when Aldarion is gonna be crowned or held, or the scepter thing, whatever ceremony is gonna happen, he wants Erendis to be there, but Erendis is like, nope, not coming. Makes sense. I can see that. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be everything that I have for this segment. I always want to call it a chapter, but it's not a chapter. There's just like little segments. So we are roughly, I want to say roughly, because I don't know if I'm going to be doing the whole book or if there's going to be some spots to, kind of glance over, but technically we're about halfway through. So I kind of wanted this Numenor book to be about 10 parts, I would say. It might be 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. So we're about halfway through, guys. So after the next chapter. So I would say aim for like 12 parts. So otherwise, yeah. Be sure, now that I've covered the whole segment, the whole episode now, just be sure to check out my fantasy book, The Lands of Ordia, Power of Heaven. It is on Amazon. I am still writing the second book. I've been trying to find as much time as possible to really write in the story, and it is hard with a busy schedule. A lot of things are happening, and now that spring's kind of approaching, a lot of things get busier on my end, like personal schedules and whatnot, so it's kind of hard to find time to both write and to record at the same time. So I pretty much have like multiple projects going on at once, so it is a little bit hard, but I hope you guys still enjoy like this podcast, and then I gotta find time to write my extensively lore building book. So pretty much long story short, or short story long, be sure to check out my book out. And I hope that you guys, enjoy my other segments, the Traversing Through Terra and the Grim Captivation. I will be continuing that through the rest of this year. So I greatly appreciate all the views and listens. And I think, with all that being said, just stay tuned for another episode. May the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell!